Growing up, parents got me a guitar. Said you could do anything, kid, you could go far. You could be the president, fireman, race cars. The sky's the limit, kid, so shoot for the stars. So I strummed that guitar every day. Found a passion for music, never went away. I joined a couple bands and played a few shows. Tried to impress the girl in the front row. But soon enough, everything starts to change. As you grow up, nobody treats you the same. They try to take your future and make it real safe. You could be a doctor, accountant, or something sane. But yo, whatever happened to the sky was the limit. I fell in love with music, never thought it was a gimmick. I worked so hard on every tune and every single lyric. My whole identity depended on being artistic. Now you wanna strip that away, so you feel okay? Cause if I make it to the top, what does that really say? That you shouldn't have given up, that you made the mistake? But if I fail, you feel much better about taking your lane, right?
Today. We are going today. I am here.
Yeah, things are gonna get better.
How's everybody doing?
Yeah, I'ma just do me, you just do you.
Camera, you might notice I have a new camera. And I am feeling pretty good. Let me see, was sound playing? Okay, good. Alright, so, sorry for the late start today. Had some personal stuff to deal with. It wasn't fun, but that's okay. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going to have to fix the artifacting and the, I forget what it's called. The video noise, I guess. Anyway, so today we are going to do a little bit of Matt Fradd, a little bit of Dan McCullen, and then we're going to get deep into Buddhism, okay? I'm going to take a break between each video. Number one, because I need water. I don't have any here in front of me. And number two, to keep fresh, okay? All right, so let's start off with Pints with Aquinas. How many minutes have we been going? I think I got to go a little bit longer before I can get into that. So let's finish an opening. We're going to go 5 minutes before we start. We're going to start at the 5-minute mark. Let's catch you up. So I did the film competition thing. Everybody liked my script, which I'm very, very happy about. The lead actress was a professional actress. The lead male, he came in to be the sound guy, but then we asked him to try out for the part, and he did really good. I did the DJ role because, well, look at this. Everything went good except for the editing, but it's in the competition. I hope we do well. And in the future, I've already asked for the rights to do my own edit, my own cut. And I'm going to release it here on YouTube, I think. After it's done, that might not be till May, though. But yeah, I wrote a movie for a competition, for a film competition, a real film competition. And I am nervous. It's going to be seen by over 1,000 people. Two audiences of 500 people each. And real actors and directors are going to vote or judge or whatever the thing goes. I did the writing, and I did play a part in the movie, in the short. And so yeah, I'm curious of what's going to happen with that. I don't know. I am having a little trouble getting back into college. They don't have a phone number anymore. It's through email, and my email, unfortunately, is having issues. So, but yeah, so the college thing is still happening, and still trying to get that going. My new job is going well. My secondary job that I'm doing, I have not been doing great at it. I need to put more time into it. All right, so that's kind of the update for today. I think it's almost going to be 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and start with Pints with Aquinas, The Real Problem with Gay Marriage with Dr. Peter Kraft. And then we're going to counter that with Dan McCullen's Is Homosexuality and the Bible a Black and White Issue? Now, what we're looking for here is we're looking for inconsistencies. We're looking for apologetics being used, not just apologetics on Matt Fradd and Peter Kraft's side, but also apologetics coming out of Dan McKellen. Then we're going to flip and we're going to go into Buddhism, Emptiness Explained. Buddhist Emptiness Explained. And we will be doing, I'm going to try to do 4 Buddhist videos this week. We might not get through all of them. We might not finish them, but let's learn a little bit about Buddhism and get into it. All right. So let's begin with Pints with Aquinas. And of course, there's going to be a commercial. Oops. Nope. Mute. There. Thank you. Okay. And there we go.
Has this wonderful, in a letter he writes about masturbation and the problem with it. And he says something to the effect of what's interesting is he has this wonderful, in a letter he writes about masturbation and the problem with it. And he says
what an
something
interesting
to the
way to
effect
start.
of this imaginary harem is always subservient, to which you are always the perfect lover. No demand is ever made upon your selfishness.
That's an image. That's an image of hell. You can't get out of yourself. There is no other. The loss of all otherness.
Yeah.
I don't think there's fire in hell. Fire is beautiful. Fire is a creature of God. I think there's nothingness in hell. It's just you. You can't get out of yourself. You can't even fight anything. That's absolute despair.
Yeah.
So I disagree with that assessment. I've always liked the expression that hell is other people. I think that's way more true than hell is yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, I try to remind myself that whenever my wife wants something other than what I want.
Yeah.
Or when I'm offended by her, or when I wish she felt differently or thought differently.
Exactly.
Christopher West was on here recently, who I know you know and love, and he was saying that once he was like, why can't my wife be more like me? And I think he meant in regards to the desire for that intimate act, eh? And then he said, well, if she was exactly like you, she'd be a man.
Exactly.
Do you want your wife to be a man? No. No,
a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And I hear homophobia there. Do you hear homophobia there? Or am I just being oversensitive? I hear homophobia there. And also hear fear of the other. And even fear of the self. And don't get me wrong, self-denial is part of traditional Christianity and traditional Catholicism. But I do hear homophobia.
And that, I think, is the deepest problem with homosexuality, the loss of the other. Assuming that men and women are really different and God designed them that way. It's not just obedience to God's design. It's what we most deeply need, the other. The otherness of the other.
Yeah.
The fact that Mars and Venus can't fully understand each other. That's God's wonderful joke.
That's a really dated reference.
Yeah. Yeah, homosexuality.
I remember a cartoon. Two gays were looking at a couple quarreling.
Sorry, Matt Walsh recently said, I mean, you know who Matt Walsh is? He did that documentary, What is a Woman? Walsh recently said the biggest problem with equity is if men and women are the same, then we are all gay.
Two gays are watching a couple.
Okay, here we go.
This just sounds horrific. I can't believe he put this on his channel with no commentary.
A cartoon, New Yorker cartoon. Two gays are watching a couple quarrel, and he said, "See, those mixed marriages never work."
So say it again. Say it again. I'm
Two
so
gays
sorry.
are watching a heterosexual couple quarrel, and the comment is, "See, those mixed marriages never work."
Oh my goodness.
Marriages are meant to be mixed.
Yeah.
Iron sharpens iron.
Well, since I hadn't watched this before, I was not ready for the lack of intellectuality and lack of sophistication. So the next argument that I have heard before is going to destroy this incredibly ridiculous, horribly insulting, and emotionally and spiritually immature diatribe against homosexuality, the next argument is going to demolish this.
Yeah.
We bump up against each other. We surprise each other. We misunderstand each other.
Yeah.
We take advantage of each other.
The beauty
Thank God.
of the other. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor.
Did he just say the beauty of the other is that we take advantage of each other? Chingo. Okay, let's let this go. And then here we go to the Dan McCullen part of the show.
I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion and the fit for
Show me the data. Show me the data. I want to see the data that you're really a scholar. I can print one of these out too.
this video is Spidey. Let's take a look at a video.
The question of like homosexuality in the Bible is not
Ooh, that's muted.
It's not an argument up for discussion. It's actually a black and white issue.
All right, let's see it.
So for example, people kind of debate this idea of arsenokoitai. You know, it means something else. It was misinterpreted. The misprint of 1946. There's even a documentary coming out about it. So that's not true. Just because parts of that word were derived from another word to do with children or maps, I think is what I can say on here. That doesn't mean that that's what that word.
So any hope of this video
means.
being
That's not how
monetized in the future
language
just went out the door?
works. To Paul, the word means homosexual. To his audience, the word means.
Well, it means man bedders or man bed. But okay.
Homosexual. It doesn't even matter if the word is derived from something like a totally different thing. If that's what he meant and that's how it was interpreted, then that's what it means. Do you know what I mean? That's how language works.
No, arsenokoitai absolutely did not mean homosexuals. That was not the meaning for Paul. That was not the meaning for his audience. Whether you understand the word homosexuals to refer to anyone who identifies as having a homosexual orientation, or you understand it to refer to anyone who engages in same-sex intercourse, both senses are flagrant mistranslations of the word arsenokoitai, which refers to men who take the insertive role in an act of same-sex intercourse. So it's not all people who identify as having a homosexual orientation. It's not even all people who engage in same-sex intercourse. It's not even all men who engage in same-sex intercourse. It is a specific role within a specific act of male same-sex intercourse. And if you look in 1 Corinthians 6:9, the word right next to it, malaki, refers to men who take the receptive role in an act of male same-sex intercourse. And these were two different roles that were understood to be motivated by entirely different things. And they did not have a notion of a versatile role because they did not have a notion of a sexual orientation that in any way, shape, or form whatsoever remotely approximates the way we understand sexual orientations today. They organized their knowledge of sexuality in very, very different ways anciently, ways that we abandoned long ago. They primarily organized their understanding of sexuality around a socially conventionalized hierarchy of domination. And
So I don't like the idea of a social... Let me go back. Let me see. Hold on.
long ago, they primarily organized their understanding of sexuality around a socially conventional
hierarchy of domination. I don't know. How do I feel about that being applied to the ancient world? You look at Hercules, who dressed as a woman to get out of going to war. You look at the lead women in the plays where the threat of taking away sex from men ends all war. So women had a kind of power there, even though they were supposed to be the receptive. Men are able to lower themselves. You look at the Golden Ban, the Corinthian Golden Ban. You look at Achilles and Patroclus. You look at Alexander and I can't remember his name, but the dude, and then versus his relationship with the courtesan, the male courtesan. You look at how Socrates understood the better relationship to be platonic and not sexual. You look at Sappho and her masculine traits, which is why some people think she was actually a male writer. I'm not sure hierarchy of domination fits with some of the nuances of human relationships or the dynamics thereof once you're committed to a person. Even in the most strictest versions of Japanese culture, the woman still ran the income and the household and had power in the household over the male. Well, outside, the male would be in charge. So if I think about the culture, the Jewish culture, and the Christian culture that springs out of it, if we assume that Paul is speaking to Jewish people and we assume that the Bible is speaking to Jewish people, I think we can come to one understanding. But if we assume that the Bible is universal and that Paul is speaking to Gentiles, we can come to a different understanding of how that hierarchy could work. So I don't think a hierarchy of domination is that simple. Specifically, as in Christianity, Jesus is overturning that and reversing that order, where the highest of the high is the servant of the servant, and the lowest of the low is the rich man. So I feel there's some subtlety missing in this understanding. Or maybe some bias against the normative understanding or the common understanding of evangelicals on this verse and religious people religious Christians for the last 2,000 years.
Hierarchy of domination, and sexual agency only flowed downhill, and the people.
Again, that's I'm going to disagree with him on it only flowing downhill. Like I said, I don't think sexuality has ever been that simple.
People downstream
and if
from
you look at the ancient fictions, and even how in ancient propaganda, how they would slander kings and emperors and generals with accusations about sexual perversion, sexual submissivity. I think there is more here than what Dan McCullen is attacking.
On that hierarchy, their agency, their will didn't really matter. They were passive sexual objects. It was the person higher up on the hierarchy who was the active sexual agent. And freeborn male citizens were at the pinnacle of that hierarchy. And so the reason that male same-sex intercourse was rationalized as wrong was because it violated the hierarchy by putting a man in a submissive, subordinate sexual role.
So my pushback here would be looking at the story of Lilith, and especially the larger versions that we can find in rabbinical literature. It shows that in the Jewish society there's some pushback there. So because there is no Lilith story as the one who refused to be on the bottom but chose to be on top in the Bible itself, in the actual text of 1st and 2nd Genesis, and the little story of the family thereof up to 3. You don't have a description of what exactly Lilith's defiance is. You don't have Lilith as a character there. You know, the demon who wants a baby, who you sacrifice a baby to later on in the Bible, the Lilithu. That's not there. That is there in rabbinical, Talmudic literature and some commentary and I believe in the Rashid, but it's not in the actual text of the Bible. It's in later Jewish commentary.
On that hierarchy. Now, fundamentally, opposition to same-sex intercourse anciently was rooted in an intuitive sexual disgust. And here are a couple of articles you can read to better understand what that intuitive sexual disgust was. But it was basically related to cognitive default settings related to a sense of sexual and moral purity.
Okay, so while I disagreed with his sexuality only running in one direction, or not sexuality, but sexual power, sexual dominance only running in one direction, I do agree with the second part here, that there was a lot of judgment on sexuality in ancient cultures, and that the ancient cultures are not the overly heathenistic, immoral vestiges of animalistic nature that modern Christians like to paint him to be, or movies like to paint him to be.
And it differed from person to person and had to do with your own orientations and your own exposure to and familiarity with these kinds of sexuality. But on the social level, it has to be rationalized in a way that can be enforced and defended as normative. And so the idea of a social hierarchy of domination is what overwhelmingly governed the social discourse about the problems with same-sex intercourse anciently. Now, our sexual ethics today are built on entirely different frameworks and understandings.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with him here again. I don't think human nature has changed that fundamentally from the ancient times till today. I do think we have evolved on some moral questions, but if you go back to ancient literature, these questions do exist. I've said multiple times that in reading Livy, it sounded like reading a modern day newspaper or watching MSNBC or watching CNN. The headlines are at the same. Switch out Caesar for Bush or Caesar for Trump. Switch out the wars. I mean, in some of the places, those wars are still going on. So, no, I don't think we've evolved that far socially or societally.
Understandings, and they are not built on the Bible. As much as people think they are.
I come from a Hispanic culture. I live in a predominantly Hispanic culture. I don't come from an Anglo-Saxon culture. So my take on this is different than Dan McCullen's. Now, I don't know if he grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood. Maybe he was the only white kid in a Mexican neighborhood. That happens. But I'm assuming that's not the case based on what he's saying here. Because there are deep family ties and deep cultural ties in cultures such as mine.
They are not. We develop our own sexual ethics, and the Bible is really just a proof text for people who want to arrogate more authority to their own particular sexual ethics. There are so many things that the Bible says is good and right that we have rejected, and rightly so. Anybody who thinks that they follow everything the Bible says is good and right and of God doesn't have the foggiest idea what they're talking about. They're simply...
And I don't agree with this. I'm going to call it an insult, even though he might not mean it as an insult. I don't agree with that either. Even if you accept that most people haven't actually read the Bible, even if you accept that even those who have read the Bible are virtually biblically illiterate, even if you accept the fact that pastors and preachers and apologists purposely mislead the people on what the Bible says, even if you include all of that, the general dogmas that develop out of the Bible were come to conclusions by, if not well-educated, at least very intelligent and well-argued people from well-argued positions, regardless of their biases. and they were voted on by councils. Now, you can say that the early church father councils got more right than maybe some of the later Reformation confessions. Fine. But you can see a Christian tradition that adopts these ideas regardless of what the Bible says. That the Reformists needed the Bible to justify their dogmas, while limiting is still confirming of the fact that what the councils and what different groups of men and women decided was correct morally based on their understanding of the Bible held up to the scrutiny of the Protestants who wanted to escape the control of the dogma of the Catholic Church. And even then, they still affirmed many of the same rulings. So I would think that while you can argue that your understanding is better or more modern, it is weird that you would argue that a later dated, better developed, well-formed version of the Bible is less true, less accurate, less reliable than an older source. I don't think you would do that. I don't think you would. I think you would say the older source is the better source. Well, if the older source of Christian tradition says that this is what was taught from the beginning, and your newer, younger, more influenced position has a different opinion, well, I would go with the older tradition. That doesn't mean I wouldn't consider your opinion or even use it to help my understanding. But I do think the tradition itself defends itself quite well, as it has been the orthodox position, the dominant position, if you don't want to use the word orthodox. It has been the dominant position for 2,000 years. I think that should be weighed and considered when interpreting the Bible, how others have interpreted it, unless you want to argue that the interpretation has been wrong for 2,000 years. And I'm not talking about the Protestant position. I'm saying Orthodox, Catholic, Chalcedonian. If the oldest still living traditions disagree with your interpretation, what makes you sure that your interpretation is the correct one? And I don't think a piece of paper that says you have a doctorate degree makes you an authority. It just means you're really good at studying and you're good at turning in paperwork. Congratulations, you're a better student than most people. Doesn't make you an authority.
Wrong. Now, this is a feature of the Bible's outdated and obsolete and irrelevant sexual ethics that we have held on to for one main reason, and that main reason is that it has become an effective identity marker for certain groups, an effective tool to structure power and values and boundaries. And so it has been maintained as a tool for precisely that. But it is an incredibly harmful tool that has resulted in untold suffering and anguish and even death. And one day, we are going to look past our petty and our naive identity politics, and we are going to realize that no amount of value as an identity marker is worth the suffering and the anguish and the death that it causes. And we're going.
I think that's the most naive statement I've ever heard. I just played for you, right before Dan McCullen spoke, statements that I do not condone. I I do not agree with. And I find insulting, immature, even hateful. And I'm part of their community. I am a Catholic. No, identity politics, division will never end. Ever. Never. Not until everything's gone. There will always be racists in the world. There will always be sexists in the world. There will always be hateful people. And it's not just white people who can be cruel. Black people can too. Mexicans can too. It's not just men who can abuse their power. Women can abuse their power too. The problem is not race. The problem is not gender. The problem is people, human beings. When a cat tortures and kills a bird, we don't call the cat immoral. When a pack of dogs or wolves shred a baby animal for food, we don't call them evil. We don't even call them cruel. When sharks or dolphins do their thing, there's no moral judgment there. Even though when we get to higher forms of animals like dolphins and wolves and elephants, they can reason, they have big brains, they can think, but we don't put moral judgment there. What is unique about humans is our moral judgment, is our ability to reason beyond our limitations. And is that ability to go beyond our limitations, not only in reasons, but in abilities. And to modify ourselves with technology. That will continue to grow. But our innate animal nature, amoral as it may be, that baseness will not change as long as we are human. Yes, I do believe human beings are good. I do believe that we were created good, but I also believe we are capable of great wickedness and great evil and great harm to the other. I have suffered that harm. I have been abused and spit on, rocks thrown at me, labeled horrible, horrible things because I'm Hispanic, dyslexic, because I used to identify as pansexual, because my friend group when I was in high school would now be identified as queer, but we didn't have that word when I was a teenager. I'm very old. I know what it's like to be ostracized for dating the girl who only speaks Spanish and having a table of football players stop talking to you because you chose not to sit at the popular table. I know what it's like to have people show up in front of your house with baseball bats because you're different. So no, you are naive. The cruelty and judgment and pettiness of people will never disappear. But through things like religion, we can combat it. Through the unity that religion can provide. And while you might think that unity isolates the individual other, it can also heal and invite in the individual other. In that way we can grow. In that way we can become better. But to think we're going to erase human nature at any point in history without no longer being human, that is severely naive.
We're going to put the lives of members of the LGBTQ plus community ahead of those petty and naive identity politics. It's only a question of when enough people decide that human lives are more important than their access to power and resources.
And I also want to disagree with that very, very last point. I do not think it has to do with power and resources. I disagree with power plus, I can't think of it right now, the PPP one. I disagree with that altogether. I don't think that's how human nature works. Okay, I am going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we have Buddhism, baby. Enjoy the music. I will be back within 5 minutes. I'm just going to get some water.
Growing up, parents got me a guitar. Said you could do anything, kid, you could go far. You could be the president, fireman, race cars. The sky's the limit, kid, so shoot for the stars. So I strummed that guitar every day. Found the passion for music never went away. I joined a couple bands and played a few shows. Tried to impress the girl in the front row. But soon enough, everything starts to change. As you grow up, nobody treats you the same. They try to take your future and make it real safe. You could be a doctor, accountant, or something sane. But yo, whatever happened to the sky was the limit. I fell in love with music, never thought it was a gimmick. I worked so hard on every tune and every single lyric. My whole identity depended on being artistic. Now you wanna strip that away so you feel okay? Cause if I make it to the top, what does that really say? That you shouldn't have given up, that you made the mistake? But if I fail, you feel much better about picking your lane, right? Yeah, things are gonna get better real soon. Yeah, I'ma just do me, you just do you. I swear it's gonna get better real soon. Don't let anyone tell you what you should do. I got a clear view. We're gonna make it soon. Just keep pushing through. You're what you got to lose. You're what you got to lose. You're what you got to lose. Just keep pushing through. Cause what you got to lose, 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 got to lose. I won't give up, I won't back down until the line sinks in underneath the deep ground. I won't give up, I won't back down. There's nobody stopping me except.
Okay, so I am back. All right, so let's give you a little bit of my background on Buddhism. In high school, I dated a Buddhist. She was very interesting. She was very beautiful, very tall, very weta. Just beautiful person. Then. Right after high school and before college, when I had my little sabbatical, I also dated a Buddhist. Then that relationship didn't go well because the person had issues, but she was very, very deep into Buddhism, very deep into yoga. Then I married my wife a few years ago, and I went to China, and she took me to not all. She took me to the big major Buddhist shrines around Guangzhou. And we went up the mountain to several of them. I got to visit them. I got to check them out. They were very cool. We spent a lot of time there. At several. I think we went to 3 or 4 of them altogether, maybe 5. And that was really interesting. Also, I've read Buddhist stuff, but I wanted to do a video on Buddhism a while back where I bought some books and I was going to read through them. Never got around to that. So instead, we are going to do this. All right, here we go. Hopefully there's no copyrighted music, and let's go.
And most life-changing concepts of Buddhist philosophy. Many critics of Buddhism see emptiness as a form of nihilism, contradiction, or plain absurdity. But these accusations are based on shallow understanding. In fact, throughout its history, Buddhist philosophy has developed at least 5 distinct meanings of shunyata. Each of these is profound enough to change one's entire perception of reality. In any case, I have to warn you, the great Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna wrote that when it is wrongly seen, emptiness destroys the dough with it, like a snake wrongly grasped. So, if you don't want to risk being bitten and poisoned by this insight, you may want to click away from this video. But...
So I'm going to do a different video every night. We're not going to spend a long time on each video. I did that with Taoism and that backfired just a little bit. So we're going to just do a video a night on Buddhism. I don't plan to finish any particular one. I just want to get a good feel of different people's points of view. All right, let's keep going.
The reward of properly understanding emptiness is equally great. To grasp shunyata in all its depth and to embody it in your life constitutes full spiritual awakening. We can start with more humble ambitions. In this video, I have divided the complex teaching of emptiness into 5 sub-teachings.
For those in the chat, how's my voice? Can you hear me? I have the volume turned down a little bit.
But it will help me present
If you need to turn it up, let me know.
in a more
My voice,
organized
not
fashion.
the audio.
Let's go through these 5 one by one, and let's see how much they will deepen our understanding of reality. I hope after you're done watching this...
Okay, so because we're not going to get through the whole thing tonight, let's look at this. No subject, no object, no subject and object, Buddha nature, qualities of consciousness awareness, thank you, Turtle. Let's see. No views and conclusion.
Some of your core beliefs about the nature of the world and of yourself will be challenged, in a good way. So, grab a seat because we're going deep with this one. I welcome you into the great Buddhist teaching of Shunyata.
Shunyata.
Chapter 1. No Subject. The first Buddhist to use the word Shunyata was the historical Buddha himself. In the Sunya Sutta, he talks about emptiness like this. It is because it is empty of self and of what belongs to self that it is.
I wonder how much, and I've always wondered this, it's not a new thought, how much Buddhist emptiness is related to Taoist void. If those ideas influence each other throughout history, or it's just coincidental that they both developed in neighboring cultures.
Said empties the world. The first meaning of emptiness is that in the world of our experience, a self or anything belonging to a self is nowhere to be found. We've covered this before, so here we will pause on it only briefly. For the Buddha, conscious experience is like a musical performance. We can divide a musical performance in 3 parts: a musician, a musical instrument, and the music itself. In the same...
You know, it's interesting that in Buddhism, self-denial is also a very highly prized and lofty goal.
way, conscious experience involves sense objects, sense organs, and consciousness. Music arises when the musician is playing her instrument. In the same way, consciousness arises when sense objects come in contact with sense organs.
Get copyright claimed.
It is in these 3 components of experience, sense objects, sense organs, and consciousness, that the Buddha says a self cannot be found. Let's examine the act of hearing as an example. When a pianist plays the piano, music is produced. This music is a sense object. If you have healthy ears, these are your sense organs for sounds. When the music from the piano reaches your ears, you hear it. This experience of hearing the music is consciousness. We instinctively say, I hear the music, but this phenomenon of hearing is the result of an automatic chain of causes and conditions, a completely deterministic domino effect. Contact between the pianist and the piano causes...
Okay, so here's part of this. Let's start off with anti-apologetics part of this channel. None of this could have been known or would have been known at the time of the Buddha, of the first Buddha, if you will, or even the 33rd Buddha. The understanding of how the ear worked or how music translated, music theory was not fully developed. And definitely how the brain processed music was definitely not understood, as it's not completely understood today. When the rest of your mind goes, if you have dementia, the music remains. So yeah, this is heavily apologeticalized. But okay, let's keep going.
causes the music. Contact between the music and the ears causes hearing of the music. Without a pianist or a piano, there is no music. Without music or ears, there is no hearing of music. In
This is a good analogy either way. It's still a good explanation.
this chain reaction, there is nothing to which we can attribute a self, nor is a self required for all of this to occur. The Buddha says, the ear is empty of a self, or of anything pertaining to a self. Sounds, ear consciousness, and ear contact are empty of a self, or of anything pertaining to a self. He applies the same logic to all 6 senses, including the mind, which he considers a 6th type of sense. Hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, seeing, and thinking are all automatic processes that occur when the right causes appear in the right conditions. The point here is that if you investigate it deeply, you would see your personal experience is actually entirely non-personal. There is no you to whom experience is occurring, no experiencer of experience. Only
Sorry
an
about
endless
that, a cord
cycle
got
of
caught in
causes and
something.
conditions stretching infinitely back and forward in time. This cycle, as we saw in the video on the 4 Noble Truths, brings us endless suffering and disappointment. And what is the fuel that keeps it running? It is our clinging to what we like and our
You know, one of the things that's problematic when it comes to views on these things, on the Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion, is this voice, this very calming, we're all doing this. It's hard to maintain an audience with that. So what we're going to do, so I don't lose you all, we're going to speed it up and we're going to be skipping around, okay? So we're going to go a little bit further here, and on each one we're just going to skip around. We might even get to the whole video if I do it that way. Okay, let's continue.
avoidance of what we don't like. It all has to do with what our self wants. Or about the collective
Anybody want I don't know what this is. Anime. All right. Yeah.
ideas in different parts of the world.
Plato and Socrates
Anyway,
was a
Nagarjuna's
Buddhist?
point is that nothing possesses a swabhava, an individual essence. All things are a form of dependent origination. Their origin
All things are a form of dependent origination, not independent origination. No first cause. That's anti-Christian.
is dependent on other things. The great scholar saint summarizes this in the following stanza. There does not exist anything that is not dependently arisen. Therefore, there
There does not exist anything that is not dependently arisen.
does not exist anything that is not empty.
Therefore, there does not exist anything that is not empty.
Here you might ask, if every object and phenomenon in the world is empty, wouldn't that mean the world itself is empty? That nothing exists and nothing is happening? But this is absurd, because after all, I am watching this video. Clearly, something does exist and something is happening. This is a good question, and by the end of this video, you will have heard a few possible answers to it. For now, I'll say Nagarjuna explicitly refused the wrong view that nothing exists. But he said the view that things exist is just as wrong. These images containing the color orange. But that's the point. You have seen orange in the past. Anyone can Google and see orange images. If I look at the sunset while you look away, I will see orange hasn't disappeared. In all cases, seeing orange is the proof of its existence. Our experience is the base.
Someone told me, and I don't know if it's true, that what we're seeing is every color but the color reflected. So we're actually seeing the opposite color that's actually there. As someone who's dyslexic, this is funny because there's a cool little truth to the world, which is everybody in the world sees things upside down except for people with dyslexia. And we have to force our eye to work doubly as hard so that way we can force ourselves to see things incorrectly. So that way we can speak and communicate with people who don't have dyslexia. But if you're missing the lens that flips things, you see things the way things really are, but everyone else sees things flipped. But that makes it a disability because everybody else sees things flipped. Oh, that's a good little one. That's a good little one. That's I remember that. I remember learning that when I was younger.
upon which existence is confirmed. After all, can you imagine a color that you're not?
Also, there are colors outside of our spectrum of reception, our view spectrum, whatever.
Currently seeing? No. Into subject and object is empty. Subject and object are like heads and tails, two sides of a single coin. But heads and tails are only conventional terms. In reality, we never find one without the other. Only the coin itself is real and contains in itself all of itself. Any division we may impose on it are artificial labels produced by the duality of conceptual thinking.
See, he has dualities, and that makes me think that they're false dualities, which again sounds very apologetical.
Visible wholeness of heads, tails, and coin is how the Yogacarans understood experience. In the Yogacara view, all that exists is experience. To the unenlightened mind, reality feels like a subject at one end and an object at the other. But an awakened mind sees the unity of all things in the flow of conscious experience.
Unity and dependence versus individuality and independence. Interesting contrast.
Reality is the experience of itself. Reality is both that which experiences and that which is being experienced by itself. If you're finding it hard to wrap your head around this, don't worry.
No, this is very simple stuff. Okay, let's go for it.
But literally means Buddha womb. Most often it's translated as Buddha nature. Now,
Buddha
why are we
nature.
discussing this in the middle of a video on emptiness? Well,
You know, I don't appreciate the people who want to talk about Christ's nature, because that's just not the nature of Christ, but Christ's nature as in a lot of times they bring in a lot of Eastern ideas, you know, when Jesus met the Buddha or when Jesus met such and such ancient character. These things never happened. Jesus never met the Buddha in that way. Jesus never traveled into India like some people like to speculate.
because the Tathagata is one of the most important and revolutionary ideas which evolved out of Shunyata. Remember, Nagarjuna showed us how objects of experience are empty of independent essence. Coupled with the Buddha's teaching of no self, this leaves our picture of reality as both lacking real objects and lacking real subjects. And yet, Nagarjuna maintained reality is not empty.
But if you're always one with the universe and always unindividualized and always denying yourself and denying your desire, can you ever really desire the best for the whole if the whole is also supposed to be in self-denial? So while we're one giant human organism and one giant organism called Earth and one much larger organism called the Milky Way, much larger organism called the universe, or the cosmos or whatever, and we're one giant living thing. I don't want to say uncaringness, but the unconcern that the larger self, the larger being has for the individual is... So you would care if you lose a finger, but you don't cry that you lose 100 cells of skin every day, or, you know, your old skin cell dies off. You don't cry about that. It's only when a cell becomes cancerous you even care that it exists. You don't think about the cells on the bottom of your feet or on your shin or the ones in your bones. Maybe you think about your blood cells, but you know, you're not thinking about it in all that sense. You know, maybe you think about the follicles in your face in the front. You don't really think about the follicles in the back of your head. So that uncaring nature, that indifference the universe might have to you, might not work so well for this analogy of denying the self for the better good.
Of reality.
Even denying that there is bad and good.
In other words, there is something, even if it can't be defined in subjective or objective terms. The Yogacarans continued this line of reasoning. For them, what our unenlightened minds understand by the term experience is the closest we can get to a concept of reality. Deep insight reveals you are experiencing and being experienced by experience. The Tathagata Garpa doctrine is the next step in this line of reasoning. At the same time, it is also a radical break from everything we've covered. Many even call it a heresy. Let me explain. The Tathagata teaching tells us ultimate reality can be talked about, as it does possess qualities.
So again, I thought I was really smart when I came up all on my own of the idea of ultimate reality and absolute reality. I thought I was really, really smart. And then I started reading texts just 10 years later, and it turns out other people came to those same kind of ideas a long time before I ever had that thought. But every time I hear someone say those words, I'm like, hey, that was my word. I said that in junior high and high school.
Even more, get this,
how'd they know
ultimate
this word?
reality possesses the qualities of a self. And not just any self, but the capital S self of the Tathagata. Ultimate reality is the Buddha. Okay, this sounds way too out there, so let's take a step back. Like most Buddhist teachings, the Tathagata is rooted in direct experience. So, let's test this teaching against our own concrete experience. Let me ask you a question. What is the difference between you?
So it sounds very existential to me now. Probably not if I had read it back in high school, but it sounds very existential, where if there can be no concrete experience, how everything is subjective and relative. You know, everything only has the meaning that we give it. Sounds very, very existential to me.
You and me. I mean this literally. What makes you one thing and me another? Perhaps we can start with the fact I've made this.
Distance, time, the fact that we're not the same cells. So there's a really beautiful idea in the unity of Christianity that we all come from Adam and Eve. But mathematically and genetically, it turns out we have to have separate pools of genetic distinction that we came and arrived from, which means we're not all related. And there are different species of human, though our species is the species that existed, that still exist. But we will slowly, as we interbreed, become more and more ununique, which is in a way a sad thing. But we go back to the first cell that divided. So if we think about what we learned about genetics and we apply that to the origin of life, that means that there has to be multiple orientations, multiple firsts, not just a single first, to have the variety of life that we have. Which means multiple creations happen at multiple times. Now we don't have a single creation. Now we don't have a single ancestor, which now puts us further apart. So, what if there were multiple Big Bangs, not just one? What if creation or reality is what if reality is when different creations, different realities meet? Different collectives collide and create individuals.
Video and you're watching it. That's one difference. I'm speaking and you're listening. My name is Simeon, and your name, in all probability, is not Simeon. I'm also located in Sofia, Bulgaria, whereas you might be anywhere else in the world. We can have differences in age, sex, height, weight, skin color, eye color, education, and so on. We may have different opinions, beliefs, and temperaments. These are some of the things that make us different. Because of these, we can't say you and I are one and the same thing. But here comes the Tathagata twist. Making this video is an experience in my conscious awareness. Watching this video is an experience in your conscious awareness.
So again, it's individual, separate consciousness, separate creations, colliding into each other and intermixing, and that makes a unique individual, because now you have two separate non-entities becoming one entity. Happening over and over again, each mixture different than the last, each integration at different levels.
Being a 25-year-old male Bulgarian is an experience in my conscious awareness. Your age, sex, and nationality are experiences in yours. You see, all the differences we can list are differences in the content of our awareness. Differences in what we experience, not differences. Mistake conscious awareness with the will or the intellect. Your will and intellect may resist or become attached to experiences, but your conscious...
Yeah, but non-attachment has very negative reactions when a mother a Buddhist monk who's a mother Buddhist nun who's a mother refuses to care for her child because if she feels that her attachment to that child is evil or wicked. So I think there is a problem with some of these concepts. I think they do expose flaws in human nature when they're taken too literally or too far.
Awareness is that which experiences these resistances and attachments. It is the field in which they appear as objects. Thirdly, your conscious awareness is empty. It can hold any thought, emotion, feeling, and experience because it is itself empty of thoughts, emotions, feelings, and experiences. It is like the space
A glass can be filled with anything.
of an empty room, which can be filled with furniture because it is itself empty of furniture. Could my conscious awareness lack this empty, spacious nature? No, because then it would be an object of awareness and not awareness itself. Finally, your conscious awareness is outside time and space. Time and space appear in it as objects, but it itself cannot be located anywhere within time and space. Could my conscious awareness belong to time and space? No, because then it would have form and duration, but at all times and all places, my conscious awareness is always present, here and now.
I wonder if we could argue that the energy and thought processes that we have are actual physical things, now that we know more about the mind. Darn it. Okay, we're going to let this commercial play and then we'll hop back into it.
Emptiness to be some sort of ultimate reality. To him, even the term emptiness is ultimately empty. It only means something relative to our unenlightened everyday views on reality.
Again, everything becomes relative and subjective.
Some criticize the Tathagata doctrine as a mistaken interpretation of Nagarjuna's emptiness. Others point to the clear contradiction between the Tathagata and the Buddha's original no-self teaching. To them, the Tathagata is an alien concept smuggled into Buddhism from other traditions like Hinduism. Also, the scriptures that talk about the Tathagata, like the one I quoted, were written centuries after the death of the historical Buddha.
I do think it's interesting how much the Eastern religions affect each other and change each other over time. How yoga from Hinduism and yogic, I guess Hindic ideas influence, Vedic ideas influence Buddhism, and then Buddhism in turn influences Hinduism, and then Hinduism and Buddhism influence Taoism, and they kind of mix together in the Western mind when trying to think of it, while in the Eastern mind you can see the differences. But I think there's this YouTuber who said something beautiful, that in some of these Eastern cultures you're a Buddhist or you're a Christian in the morning, you're a Buddhist in the afternoon, and you're a Taoist in the evening. So yeah.
This does not mean they don't contain authentic spiritual insight, but I wouldn't bet on them being records of what the historical Buddha actually said. In their defense, the proponents of the Tathagata point out that the self of the Tathagata is an entirely different kind of self from what the Buddha attacked. In this video. Of course, we have seen that things are much more complicated than that. Ultimately, there is no me, no you, and no video. This is the ultimate truth of emptiness. Pay attention here. The Buddhists did not say conventional truth is false. They still considered it a kind of truth. For example, if I say my name is Kanye West and I've painted the Mona Lisa, this is both ultimately and conventionally untrue. Buddhist philosophy recognizes and respects conventional truth. After all, we are conventional beings. We can't function on the level of the ultimate, or we can't do it most of the time. Most of the time we have jobs to do, kids to feed, and taxes to pay. You can't do this as the Tathagata.
Okay, so I'm in the middle of a thing with my wife right now, so I will have to hang up. I will have to go ahead and stop the video a little bit early. We got 38 minutes through. We did 3 videos. Tonight was a very peaceful night. Like I said, this is going to be Buddhism week. We're not going to stay with this guy. We'll go to another guy in a few minutes. I appreciate all of you. Turtle, thank you. Did you have a question? Let me read it. Hold on. Let me go here. I do not have that channel set up for viewing. Turtle tipped, and he said, I don't get to catch your live streams often, but I very much appreciate your streams. Helps expose me to things I don't often seek out myself, with what feels like a guiding hand, so I don't get lost in what's happening, what's being said. Thank you. Thank you, Turtle. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the tips so deeply. Thank you. You're awesome. Ad Astra, I love you. I'm glad that you were here. Everyone else who was here today and those who are listening in incognito mode and not showing up, thank you. I think it's funny that we're ending on no views. That's funny. I love you all. Have a great night. I'll be on tomorrow, and we'll continue with Buddhism. This is going to be Buddhism all week this week. If anything happens interesting in the Christian world, I'm going to do like I did in this video and just highlight it in the front and then go into Buddhism. All right. Everyone have a great night. Thank you for listening.